Beyond the swirling haze of countless star clusters lay the mysterious planet Ventura, a world cloaked in howling storms and shimmering crystals that defied mortal comprehension. Traveling merchants spun tall tales of the planet's swirling cyclones and rumored that an otherworldly queen ruled it with unyielding power. The mention of her name, Althea Stormrider, was enough to silence entire taverns across the galaxy. Men from dozens of alien races whispered about her legendary might, which had reportedly toppled kings and warlords alike. For as long as anyone could recall, Althea had governed Ventura through a combination of raw elemental control and an enigmatic aura. The planet itself seemed tethered to her will. Winds roared when her anger flared, and thunder drummed across the horizon in tandem with her heartbeat. Ships that drifted too close to Ventura's orbit often found themselves bombarded by relentless bursts of energy, forcing them to turn away in fear. Perhaps, some said, it was her method of keeping intruders at bay. Ventura's surface was a sight both terrifying and breathtaking. The crystalline deserts sparkled like shattered glass under the sun's glare, and fierce electromagnetic storms twisted across the violet sky. Flashes of lightning illuminated the jagged silhouette of the storm citadel, a fortress carved from a rare type of crystal that magnified ambient energy. Legends claimed that the citadel had stood for millennia, but no recorded history predated Althea's rise to power. To most of the galaxy, that place was as ancient and unyielding as time itself. Despite the grandeur, life on Ventura was harsh. The people who inhabited its windy plains had adapted to the environment over centuries, their skin and physiology capable of withstanding electric currents that would fell outsiders in seconds. Their society was stratified, with a noble class that claimed descent from the earliest storm tamers, and a formidable military whose loyalty was sealed by iron discipline and, above all, fear of Althea's wrath. Among these ranks stood General Calix, an imposing figure whose loyalty to the Queen was legendary. Also at her side was Admiral Seraphine, a brilliant strategist who oversaw Ventura's orbital defenses. She had witnessed how suitors arrived, draped in promises of alliance or conquest, only to flee or die after underestimating Althea's dominion. Some emissaries planned marriages, hoping to share or steal her power. Their fates were seldom kind. None of them realized that beneath Althea's harsh exterior lay a woman who had grown weary of orchestrating storms. Even the greatest storm, after all, held a quiet center. Yet Althea never showed weakness. If a warlord approached with an army, she dismantled it with ruthless efficiency. If a diplomatic mission attempted flattery or deceit, she would evoke her destructive gales and drive them back into the void. Over the years, so many alien men had tried to dominate her, to harness her power for themselves. Their failures became cautionary tales told around interstellar campfires. Her name alone, Althea Stormrider, evoked awe and hesitation. Fear, she believed, was simpler than trust. In the lavish halls of the Storm Citadel, crystals refracted the constant arcs of electricity, painting dancing silhouettes on the walls. Althea would stride across the gleaming floors, her dark hair trailing behind her as sparks flickered around her ankles. The nobility bent the knee whenever she passed, their eyes averted, their hearts pounding. She commanded respect through stoic silence and occasional bursts of unstoppable force. Those close to her, like General Calix, sensed her dissatisfaction with the unending cycle of intimidation. But no one dared question her methods. Far beyond Ventura, civilizations rose and fell, but none truly challenged Althea's domain. The galaxy's greatest powers respected her neutrality and recognized that her single-planet kingdom was more formidable than many interstellar empires. If a threat ever grew too close, the storms would roar and the threat would vanish. And so her legend expanded, and with it, her isolation. No man of any alien race, no matter how proud, dared remain in her presence longer than a fleeting moment. The glacial emptiness of her life deepened, hidden by her thunderous renown. However, fate had ways of weaving unexpected paths. In a distant region of space, a Terran vessel, small and unassuming, completed a survey mission among asteroids. Its pilot and researcher, Marcus Hale, was in the midst of cataloging mineral compositions for Earth's Special Expeditions Division. Quiet and methodical, he had lived half his life in the shadow of wars that ravaged the galaxy. He believed in practicality, in analyzing data, and in preserving his own life above all else, until everything went astray. A pirate ambush shattered the calm. Marauders emerged from stealth behind a rogue planetoid, bombarding Marcus's ship with disruptor fire. The craft's shields flared in protest, and emergency lights began to shriek. Despite his best maneuvers, a second volley ripped through the hull. Atmospheric alarm screamed as air pressure dropped. With only seconds to decide, Marcus triggered the escape pod. He tumbled into a pressurized capsule, leaving behind the remnants of his vessel as it exploded in a flash of light. The momentum flung him into a new gravitational pull, a cosmic gust carrying him toward the coordinates of Venterra. Althea's intelligence network detected the incoming object. Admiral Seraphine surmised it was a stray vessel or fragment, not an overt threat. Still, she sent word to the Queen. Althea listened calmly as Seraphine described the faint life signs. Human, a species rarely encountered in this sector. The Queen's eyes narrowed with curiosity. Humans had once explored parts of the galaxy with a fleeting presence, but no Terran had visited Venterra in living memory. Althea could have left him to the storms. Yet something about the unknown traveler intrigued her. She summoned a specialized patrol. Lightning danced around Althea's ornate armor as she stepped onto an anti-grav skimmer. General Calix urged her to remain behind and let him lead the mission, but she waved him off with a hand alight with electric arcs. The desert winds howled when she set forth, slicing through swirling sand as the storm's citadel's gates rumbled open. In that moment, the entire court felt a ripple of anticipation. Another intruder had come to their realm, but this one was different. A Terran, fragile perhaps, yet distinct from the usual supplicants. Marcus had managed to cushion the escape pod's landing by deploying retro thrusters at the last moment. Even so, the impact was brutal. He crawled out, disoriented, onto a dune that sparkled like crushed diamonds. A savage wind tore at his flight jacket. He wiped blood from a gash on his forehead and squinted at the swirling sky. Flashes of violet lightning illuminated roiling clouds that seemed almost alive. Nothing in his Earth-based training had prepared him for a planet's atmosphere so fiercely charged. A taste of metal hung on his lips each time he inhaled. He began to take stock of his supplies, hobbling on a twisted ankle. The pod's comm array was beyond repair. Faint sizzling arcs clung to every piece of metal. Even the emergency beacon crackled ominously in the electrical air. Marcus quickly realized he was in a precarious state. The environment alone might kill him if the storms intensified. But in a crisis, he remained pragmatic. He improvised a reflective tarp for temporary shelter, hoping the swirling dust wouldn't tear it to shreds. Then he saw them approaching, dark silhouettes against the horizon, riding sleek vehicles that hovered inches above the crystalline dunes. Bright arcs of lightning flickered around one figure at the forefront, as if the tempest itself parted to grant her passage. Marcus braced himself, leveling the flare gun in a defensive stance. He doubted it would do much, but it was better than nothing. He had no illusions. These were likely the planet's inhabitants, and if they were hostile, he had few options. The group drew near, revealing a cadre of armor-clad soldiers with azure skin. Their eyes glowed faintly in the half-light, scanning him with practiced suspicion. At their center stood a tall woman, her posture exuding a regal command that matched the energy arcs crackling around her. The wind seemed to die in her presence, replaced by a tense, charged silence. Marcus felt the hairs on his arms stand on end, but he did not lower his gaze. It was more curiosity than defiance. He simply wanted to see the face of the one who led them. She studied him, noticing he was injured, but also that he didn't tremble. Most alien men would have scrambled backward, stuttering pleas or boasting in vain. This human was calm, battered from crash, yet standing tall. Althea's voice shimmered with electric undertones as she spoke. "A Terran," she said. "You have trespassed on Ventara's domain." Marcus swallowed, meeting her eyes. "I didn't choose to crash here," he replied, "but I'll try not to overstay my welcome." The soldiers' grips tightened on their weapons at his irreverent tone, but Althea merely tilted her head. She could have unleashed a bolt of lightning, showing him what it meant to trespass on her land. Yet she sensed no arrogance in him, just a matter-of-fact acceptance of fate. Though she recognized the practicality in capturing him for interrogation, she found herself intrigued. So instead of punishing him on the spot, Althea turned to her men. "Bring him to the Citadel," she commanded, "alive and unharmed." With that, she spun on her heel. The soldiers hustled forward, leading Marcus toward a second hover skimmer. He climbed aboard, wincing as pain coursed through his twisted ankle. But in a distant corner of his mind, he felt relief. Perhaps he'd survive a bit longer. Within the storm citadel, crystal corridors hummed with contained static. Marcus was ushered through antechambers that glowed with trapped lightning, sealed behind transparent walls. Servants wearing intricately layered garments rushed about with wide eyes, some casting furtive glances at the newcomer. He was an anomaly, a being from a distant planet that few had ever heard of. His presence alone rippled through the political fabric of Althea's court. In hushed corners, nobles whispered about what this could mean, but none dared challenge the queen's order to treat him as a guest. They gave him a chamber with a vantage point overlooking the swirling storms outside. The bed was arched from crystal, somewhat uncomfortable by human standards, but it was more luxury than he had expected. A physician with luminous markings on her hands arrived to treat his injuries, using a combination of technology and innate Venteran healing arts. The process tingled with mild electric pulses that cauterized minor wounds and accelerated tissue regeneration. Marcus found it bizarre, but effective. By the time she was finished, he could walk without limping. Later that evening, he was summoned. 2 guards escorted him through labyrinthine corridors to a grand banquet hall. Pillars of violet crystal supported a vaulted ceiling studded with orbs of trapped lightning that glowed like captive stars. Long tables of shimmering stone were laden with exotic dishes that sizzled with energy. Around them sat Venteran courtiers in garments woven with metallic threads, their gazes flicking between Marcus and the imposing figure at the head of the table, Althea. Her armor was replaced by flowing attire that still crackled with sparks along the hems. He approached carefully, uncertain of local etiquette. He bowed slightly, a gesture of respect that earned a few raised eyebrows from the watchers. Althea's expression was unreadable as she indicated a seat not too far from her. Marcus complied, ignoring the wave of unease emanating from the Venterans around him. Once he was seated, the queen spoke, her voice resonating through the hall. "This man has arrived unexpectedly among us. Though he is Terran, a race seldom seen here, we shall hear what he has to say." Silence followed. Marcus cleared his throat. "My ship was attacked by pirates. I had no choice but to land here. I apologize if this caused any disturbance." He glanced at the array of suspicious faces. "I'm not here to impose on your hospitality. As soon as I can find a way to leave peacefully, I will." A ripple of skepticism washed across the hall. Admiral Seraphine, seated near Althea, set down a gleaming goblet. "You speak as though you have options, Terran. This is Ventera, and our storms obey only our queen." Marcus acknowledged the truth in her words, but there was no trace of fear in his voice. "I realize that," he said calmly, "but I also notice you're not indiscriminately hostile. That suggests reason. And if you'll permit me, perhaps I can be of some assistance. My background involves scientific research and strategic analysis." Gasps escaped from several courtiers at his direct offer. No one had ever proposed to help Althea in such a straightforward manner, without subterfuge or manipulative flattery. Althea tapped her fingers lightly against the table's surface, sending faint sparks dancing along the edges. She studied Marcus from the corner of her eye, intrigued by his measured tone and unbroken composure. "You stand before a throne that entire empires fear," she said. "Your species has not shown its face here for generations. And yet you speak of assistance, as though you and I are equals." Marcus exhaled slowly. "I have no illusions about my vulnerability. All I can do is be honest. If that displeases you, I accept the consequences." Unexpectedly, a ghost of a smile flickered across her features, so brief that only a few at the table noticed. She raised a hand, signaling the servers to begin the banquet. Dishes were presented with arcs of static dancing over them, and Marcus, guided by a fleeting nod from Althea, sampled the Venteran cuisine. One dish crackled with a mild jolt that made his hand twitch involuntarily. He set it down with a wry grin, earning a small laugh from Admiral Seraphine. In a subdued hush, the banquet continued, the tension gradually easing as the Venterans realized the human wasn't about to challenge the queen or faint from terror. Over the course of the meal, conversation stayed formal but revealed glimpses of Ventara's challenges. Rogue clans in the outer wastelands, trade disruptions due to persistent storms, and rumors of external factions eyeing Ventara's resources. Althea listened but rarely spoke. She occasionally directed a question to Marcus about Terran technology or his experiences, and he answered candidly, neither embellishing nor underplaying his knowledge. General Calix, stoic and loyal, observed the exchange carefully, uncertain if this Terran might influence the Queen's decisions. After the banquet, Althea dismissed the court but beckoned Marcus to follow her. She led him through a corridor lined with crystalline murals depicting ancient battles, culminating at a quiet balcony overlooking the tempestuous horizon. Winds whipped overhead, and distant lightning illuminated the desert dunes. She leaned against the banister, arcs of electricity framing her silhouette. Marcus stood beside her, silent, waiting. At last, she spoke, her gaze fixed on the swirling clouds. "The men who come here usually want two things: to conquer me or to bend me to their ambitions," she said. "They arrive claiming admiration, but it's always a veil over greed. I'm curious, Terran. You show neither flattery nor fear. Why?" Marcus met her eyes, the wind pushing his hair across his forehead. "I respect power," he said, "but I don't see you as just a throne or a force of nature. You're a person, and if you wanted me dead, I'd be dead already." She tilted her head, considering his response. She turned back to the roiling storms. "You talk about reason and scientific knowledge, but you know nothing of what it means to rule a planet that tries to devour itself every day. Ventara's storms are lethal. If I loosen my grip, they could consume entire cities. My people rely on my control. Fear ensures their obedience, though sometimes I wonder if there's another way." She breathed out a slow, charged breath. "But trust is a luxury I can't afford." Marcus's voice was quiet. "Trust and fear can't coexist for long. Fear crushes honest counsel. My people learned that lesson through centuries of conflict. But I'm no stranger to adversity either. I've fought in wars back home. I know what it's like to bear responsibility for others' lives." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "I'm not here to fix Ventara or claim your power. I just ended up here. If I can help, I will." A small static crackle danced across her arms as she regarded him in the faint glow. "Perhaps we shall see what your help can accomplish." In the days that followed, the Storm's citadel buzzed with rumors. Some believed Marcus was a spy, others that he possessed some unique Terran technology. The nobility, fearful of any shift in the Queen's disposition, convened secret gatherings to discuss strategies. Among them, a cunning figure emerged, Commander Tyrion, a man who had long harbored the notion that Althea's unwavering rule stifled Ventara's potential. He whispered insidious thoughts to certain houses, suggesting that the Terran's presence signaled the Queen's weakening resolve. Meanwhile, Althea tested Marcus in subtle ways. She invited him to observe a strategic meeting about policing the desert outskirts, where rogue war bands occasionally disrupted supply caravans. The discussion turned heated when General Calix advocated for a show of force, while Admiral Seraphine favored negotiation with the roving tribes. Althea cast a glance at Marcus, silently inviting his perspective. He proposed a balanced approach, sending armed scouts to demonstrate readiness, but also offering to exchange resources if the tribes would help safeguard critical trade routes. His suggestion was surprisingly well received, and Althea nodded, concluding the meeting with a sense of cautious satisfaction. Commander Tyrion, however, ceded at the deference given to Marcus's counsel. He approached the queen afterward, bowing low. "Your Majesty, with respect, we know almost nothing of this man's intentions. I worry that his influence will disrupt our ancient traditions." Althea's response was curt, electricity crackling in her tone. "Then learn from him, Commander, before you assume the worst. Or is your loyalty so fragile that a Terran's advice threatens you?" Tyrion bowed again, but his eyes glimmered with resentment. That same night, Marcus found Althea in an isolated courtyard, practicing her sword forms beneath drifting orbs of static light. She moved with lethal grace, arcs of lightning tracing the edges of her blade. Without a word, she invited him to spar. He hesitated only for a moment, picking up a practice sword that hummed in his hand. The duel commenced, her strikes quick as lightning, his defenses relying on reflex and technique gleaned from a half-dozen martial arts. She disarmed him swiftly, sending him tumbling. Yet he rose, smiling. In that instant, Althea laughed, a rich, unguarded sound. It was a moment neither had anticipated. She offered her hand to help him up, an unprecedented gesture. "You handle yourself better than most aliens," she remarked, "but you rely on footwork too heavily." He brushed off the dust. "When you're not as strong, you compensate in other ways." The admiration in her gaze was unmistakable. For the first time in her reign, perhaps in her life, Althea allowed herself a hint of openness, a spark that was not born of fury, but of genuine warmth. Unbeknownst to them, a servant lurking behind a pillar witnessed the scene. Within hours, rumors spread that the queen sparred intimately with the Terran and even smiled in his presence. The court was abuzz, half in shock, half in dread. For if the queen truly was growing close to this outsider, what changes might befall Ventera? Some, like Admiral Seraphine, thought it might be an opportunity for growth. Others, like Commander Tyrion, perceived it as the beginning of the queen's downfall and an opening for their own ascent to power. The storm of gossip intensified when Althea privately consulted with Marcus about Ventara's energy distribution systems, explaining how she manipulated the planet's electromagnetic fields to avert catastrophic storms. He listened intently, suggesting small improvements based on Terran engineering principles, carefully mindful not to imply superiority. She appreciated his thoughtful input. "You speak rationally, not from fear or ambition," she noted, hooking a strand of hair behind her ear. "It's rare." He nodded. "Fear and ambition tend to blind reason, in my experience." In the background, political tension brewed. Certain noble houses allied with Commander Tyrion, forging an undercurrent of dissent. They spread propaganda that Althea was neglecting Ventara's ancient codes, letting a stranger disrupt the established order. A few leaders of the old guard began to hoard weaponry, preparing for an uprising. They believed that if they could strip Althea of her control over the storms, perhaps via a stolen relic or advanced technology, they could seize command of the Citadel. Yet a threat even greater than internal conspiracy lurked just beyond the star system. The Solarian hegemony, a militant coalition that had once tried to coerce Althea into a political marriage, caught wind of rumors that the Queen's resolve had softened. Seeing an opportune moment, they assembled a fleet of warships at the system's edge, eager to exploit any perceived weakness. Preliminary scans revealed a measure of planetary defenses, but if Ventara's queen truly was not the monolith she once appeared to be, the hegemony believed they could conquer the planet and harness its unparalleled energy reserves. As the day of crisis dawned, two storms converged upon Ventera, one political, the other from beyond the stars. Commander Tyrion and his cohorts launched their coup at midnight, disabling vital energy nodes in the citadel. Althea awoke to alarms. Static screens across the fortress flickered with news of sabotage. Thunder rumbled outside, but her immediate concern was an internal revolt. She summoned her loyal generals, including Calix and Seraphine. Marcus, roused from a fitful sleep, hurried to the command center, where he found Althea standing tall, arcs of electricity shimmering around her fists. Tyrion and the dissenters are targeting the storm amplifiers, Admiral Seraphine reported. They aim to disrupt your link to Ventara's electromagnetic grid. Althea's eyes narrowed. They believe if they break my connection, they can seize power. Fools! Marcus glanced at the tactical displays. They've also placed jamming devices to cut off external communication. We're effectively blind to anything beyond orbit. No sooner had he spoken than the Citadel's sensors lit up with new readings. Multiple hostile ships descending into the atmosphere. Seraphine stiffened, recognizing Solarian signatures. They're attacking now of all times. Althea clenched her teeth. The betrayal from within had weakened her defenses at the worst possible moment. General Calix, she ordered, mobilize every loyal battalion. We'll divide our forces. Half to reclaim the amplifiers, half to hold off the invading Solarians. Marcus stepped forward. I'll help coordinate ground forces. I'm not a Venteran, but I know how to handle large-scale operations. She nodded, meeting his gaze. Then fight beside us, Marcus Hale. Show me your trust is real. The Citadel became a battlefield of swirling lights and thunderous detonations. Commander Tyrion's rebels unleashed energy disruptors, nullifying segments of Althea's storm conjuration. Lightning flickered erratically in the sky, occasionally striking at random. Loyalists clashed with rebels in crystal hallways, swords clanging amid bursts of static. Meanwhile, overhead, Solarian dropships rained from the heavens, disgorging armored troopers who advanced on the fortress walls. Althea herself joined the fray, her presence igniting the air with raw, furious energy that cut through ranks of rebels in a wave of electrified wrath. Marcus led a squad of Venteran soldiers through the labyrinth of corridors to secure one of the compromised amplifiers. They encountered pockets of resistance, rebel troopers wearing advanced jamming gear. Gunfire and pulses of electromagnetic blasts ricocheted off crystal columns. Taking cover, Marcus orchestrated a flanking maneuver, outsmarting the rebels' single-minded aggression. They reached the amplifier chamber, only to find it partially dismantled. While Venteran engineers scrambled to reconnect the components, Marcus fought off the last of Tyrion's men, relying on earth-honed close-quarters techniques. Elsewhere, Althea confronted Tyrion himself in a vaulted corridor. He brandished a stolen staff, rumored to be an ancient Venteran relic, designed to siphon the planet's electromagnetic current. Arcs of distorted energy crackled between them as he sneered, proclaiming that the queen had grown soft, enslaved by her curiosity for an off-worlder. She answered with a storm-lash strike, but he repelled it using the staff's draining capabilities. For a moment, her power sputtered, the crystals overhead dimming. Tyrion lunged, jabbing the staff forward. It slammed into her shoulder, leaving a jagged burn across her armor. Groaning in pain, Althea fell to one knee. The planet's storms reflected her struggle, thunder rolling in staccato bursts. Tyrion advanced, confident in his imminent victory. Then a shot rang out from behind him. Marcus emerged from a side passage, weapon raised. The rebel commander staggered, momentarily losing control of the staff. Althea seized her chance, summoning a torrent of lightning that wreathed her body. She forced Tyrion back, electricity crackling with renewed fury. He crumpled under the surge, the staff clattering to the floor. Althea stood, breathing heavily, the burn on her shoulder smoldering. Marcus rushed to her side, ignoring the jolt of residual static. "Are you all right?" he asked, concern evident in his voice. She nodded stiffly, placing a hand on his arm for balance. The fleeting touch conveyed gratitude, an intimacy seldom witnessed by anyone in the Citadel. Tyrion lay unconscious, a symbol of rebellion quelled, for now. But outside, the Solarian assault pressed on. Regrouping, Althea directed her loyal forces to the Citadel ramparts. Streaks of plasma fire lit the sky as Solarian ships closed in. The rebels who had not surrendered or been captured found themselves in chaos, forced to either keep fighting or flee. Meanwhile, the storm amplifiers gradually regained functionality, thanks to the efforts of loyal engineers. As each amplifier came online, Althea's link to Ventara's raw energy strengthened. The swirling clouds overhead, once partially dampened, now raged with renewed vigor. Solarian bombers tried to breach the ramparts, dropping explosives that shattered crystal turrets. The Citadel trembled, and entire sections collapsed in brilliant cascades of debris. Marcus organized triage stations and worked with Venteran medics to evacuate the wounded. Fire, smoke, and sparks turned the fortress into a cauldron of war. Over comm channels, Admiral Seraphine called out for more anti-air support. She led a contingent of fighter craft to harass the Solarian dreadnoughts, but they were severely outnumbered. Althea ascended to a high balcony, where she could see the full expanse of the conflict. The wind whipped her hair into a frenzy. Lightning danced across her fingertips as she tried to focus her power. The planet's storms listened, and forked bolts of electricity tore through Solarian flight formations. Yet the Queen was exhausted, the injury sustained during Tyrion's coup slowing her. She nearly collapsed until Marcus arrived, steadying her from behind. "We need to get you medical attention," he insisted. She shook her head, her eyes blazing. "Not yet. I must finish this." Summoning the strength left within her, Althea unleashed a final, colossal torrent of energy into the storm amplifiers. The crystal spires across the Citadel glowed white-hot, channeling Ventara's atmospheric fury. Bolts rained down in rapid succession, striking the Solarian dreadnoughts with surgical precision. Hulls ruptured and flames erupted as the enemy fleet found itself in the epicenter of a storm that defied nature. One by one, the Solarian ships retreated or were destroyed, forced to realize that conquering Ventara was an impossible feat when its queen stood resolute. As the last dreadnought vanished into the crimson sunrise, battered and beaten, Althea let out a shuddering breath, her legs giving way. Marcus caught her before she hit the ground, ignoring the static discharges that leapt across her armor. He lowered her gently, calling for a medic. Soldiers and loyalists gathered around, relief warring with shock. Their queen had driven away an entire fleet, but the cost to her own body was severe. The next hours blurred into frantic treatment, advanced Venteran healing, and hushed prayers from her people that she would survive. In the aftermath, the Citadel's once pristine corridors were scorched and littered with debris. Commander Tyrion's insurrection had been quelled, and he was imprisoned along with those who followed him. Many lesser rebels begged for clemency, fearing the Queen's retribution. But as Althea's condition stabilized, it became evident her approach to punishment had evolved. She sentenced the ringleaders harshly, yet offered conditional pardons to those whose loyalties could be reclaimed. This departure from pure terror-based rule sent ripples of astonishment through Ventara. Days stretched into a week before Althea regained full consciousness. She woke in the Citadel's hidden infirmary, an airy chamber that overlooked the desert beyond. The storms were calmer now, reflecting her recuperating spirit. Marcus sat beside her bed, eyes weary but resolute. A hush fell as she slowly focused on him. "You stayed?" she whispered, voice raw. He nodded. "Every moment," he replied quietly. "You fought for them, for all of us. It only seemed right someone stood watch for you." She tried to sit up, only to grimace at the pain. He gently pressed her back against the cushions. "Easy," he said. "Your body's still healing. The storms have been less violent since you collapsed. Almost like the planet's waiting for you to recover." Althea exhaled a faint laugh that turned into a cough. "Ventara and I were entwined. My father taught me to harness its storms as a child. I never questioned it until you showed up, and everything changed." He looked at her, confusion and concern flickering across his features. "Changed how?" She closed her eyes briefly, remembering the moment she first saw him in the dunes, battered but unafraid. "I realized how tired I was of being alone, of letting fear shape every decision. I've ruled by intimidation for so long that I forgot there could be another way." Her voice trembled, a vulnerability rarely witnessed. Marcus reached for her hand, hesitating until he saw no rejection in her eyes. Their fingers intertwined, a silent acknowledgement of a fragile but profound bond. When the news spread that Althea was awake and improving, the atmosphere in the citadel shifted. The remaining conspirators either laid down arms or fled into the wilderness. Loyalists breathed sighs of relief, praising the Storm Rider for her unwavering devotion to Venterra. Noble houses, once unsettled by the presence of a Terran, now found themselves grateful that Marcus had played a crucial role in defending their home. Admiral Seraphine, in particular, made it her mission to quell any lingering prejudice, citing the Terrans' invaluable assistance in repelling the invasion. Over the following days, Althea insisted on touring the damage to the citadel in person, leaning on Marcus's arm when her own strength faltered. Cracked crystal corridors, burned-out energy conduits, and battered ramparts told the story of a fierce battle. Everywhere they went, Venturans bowed in respect. One by one, they recognized that their queen had risked her life not just out of duty, but because she cared for them. That realization sparked a new kind of loyalty, one not born solely of fear, but of gratitude and genuine admiration. In the hush of evening, Althea and Marcus often retreated to a quiet balcony that overlooked the dunes. She would stand there, letting the gentler winds tug at her hair, as Marcus observed the subtle shifts in the sky. Sometimes they spoke of Earth, of the wars Marcus had witnessed, the regrets he carried. Other times she recounted her childhood lessons, how she first felt the planet's heartbeat, and the isolation that came with absolute power. On one such night, as the star-littered darkness enveloped Venterra, she turned to him, eyes reflecting distant flashes of lightning. "I cannot promise my storms will vanish. Venterra is what it is. I am what I am," she said quietly. "But I can promise something else, a new era. I've seen how your perspective opened doors I never knew existed. My people need me to be strong, but also to be fair. Perhaps we can reshape Ventara's future together." Marcus studied her face, seeing the vulnerability beneath her regal bearing. He gently rested a hand on her shoulder. "You already have, Althea. You won't be doing it alone." She leaned forward then, closing her eyes, pressing her forehead to his in a gesture of unspoken trust. As weeks turned into months, reconstruction progressed. Commander Tyrion's attempt at revolution served as a sobering lesson, prompting Althea to implement structural reforms. She convened councils to discuss resource distribution, forging a balance between the nobility's interests and the needs of the common folk. Rebels who displayed true remorse were assigned to labor crews rebuilding damaged defenses, granting them a path to redemption. General Calix adapted to these changes, acknowledging that Venterra could indeed evolve without shattering. Admiral Seraphine championed many of these reforms, quietly pleased that the Queen was embracing a more inclusive style of governance. Meanwhile, the Solarian hegemony, still reeling from their failed invasion, retreated to their distant strongholds. Rumors spread through the galaxy about how Ventara storms had once again bested an entire fleet. But this time, the whispered tales also mentioned the Terran who fought at the Queen's side. Some warlords scoffed at the notion, yet others wondered if Althea's unknown companion gave her an unexpected tactical edge. Regardless, none dared test Ventara's might again, not for a long while. Behind the citadel's soaring spires, life found a new rhythm. In the early mornings, Marcus and Althea would spar or compare strategies, brainstorming ways to better integrate off-world trade without sacrificing Ventara's sovereignty. The planet's storms, still fearsome, grew more predictable under Althea's refined control. With Marcus's suggestions, they instituted an orbital approach corridor for Allied ships to land safely, boosting commerce and exchange of knowledge. Sometimes, Althea would catch herself smiling when she recalled the rumor. Every alien man in the galaxy was afraid of her. Indeed, fear had kept her throne intact for years. But the one man who came from outside, the Terran who had no reason to kneel or cower, ended up standing beside her through Ventara's darkest hour. She reflected on how she initially considered him just another potential conqueror or a naive fool. But he was neither. He was simply Marcus Hale, an individual whose calm courage had defied her preconceived notions. Yet their relationship went beyond simple admiration. Over time, an undeniable affection grew, rooted in mutual respect and tempered by the rigors of crisis. They never declared it in the conventional sense. Ventara's culture had few words for romantic love, steeped as it was in hierarchical alliances. Still, the court could see the closeness in how Althea's posture softened when Marcus entered a room, or how his eyes lingered on her when he thought no one was watching. On the night of a significant Venteran festival, a tradition celebrating the planet's cyclical storms receding for a day, Althea made a quiet yet profound gesture. She brought Marcus to the Temple of the First Storm, a secluded sanctuary where only rulers were permitted to stand. In the flickering torchlight reflected off vast crystal statues, she spoke the ancient vow every Storm Rider Queen was taught: "I safeguard the storms so they never consume my people. In turn, my people guard me from being lost to the storm." She paused, gazing at Marcus. "Would you stand in that circle with me?" Stepping forward, he joined her on the ceremonial dais. Together, they invoked a form of unity that transcended Ventara's old ways. She opened her palm, letting electric sparks dance across her skin, and he laid his hand over hers, accepting that crackle. It was a silent confirmation that their fates were entwined. No grand ceremony or regal announcement followed. Just the hush of the temple, the static in the air, and the unspoken understanding that she was no longer alone, and he need not wander aimlessly through the stars. In the following months, Ventara flourished in ways both tangible and intangible. Trade routes expanded, not just because of newly secured passageways, but also because other star systems dared approach without being immediately repelled by Althea's storms. Negotiations were carried out on more equal footing, with Ventara recognized for both its might and its willingness to engage peacefully. This shift in policy earned the Queen admiration from unexpected quarters, while the old guard grumbled but could not deny the positive outcomes. Though plenty of obstacles remained, lingering resentments from rebel factions, the threat of future invasions, the sheer volatility of Ventara's climate, Althea no longer bore the burden alone. Marcus took on an advisory role, bridging Terran practicalities with Venteran traditions. General Calix and Admiral Seraphine came to value his calm approach, which provided fresh insights into long-standing dilemmas. Even the common citizens, once hesitant to accept a human in their midst, grew accustomed to his presence, seeing him guide rescue operations when storms lashed out unexpectedly. In private, Althea and Marcus found solace in each other's company. He shared stories of Earth's mountains and oceans, worlds without electric storms that roared like Ventara's. She revealed the songs she'd composed as a child, echoing the hum of the planet's core. Their bond was not without tension. At times, Althea wrestled with the fear that showing too much tenderness would invite betrayal. Marcus, for his part, struggled with whether he would ever return to Earth. But these uncertainties deepened their understanding rather than diminishing it. One twilight, they stood on a cliff overlooking an expanse of luminous sand. Electric sparks shimmered across the horizon, and Althea's cloak billowed in the rising gale. She turned to Marcus and quietly said, "They once asked if I have a heart, if I am simply a vessel for the planet's fury." Her voice trembled slightly. "You've seen that I'm more than that. Do you regret staying here?" Marcus shifted, remembering the life he left behind, the complexities of Earth, the uncertainties of this uncharted path. "I came to Venterra by accident," he said, "but I stay by choice. There's nowhere else I'd rather be." She smiled, a soft, radiant expression that banished the last vestiges of her old, guarded mask. The storms overhead seemed to resonate with her warmth. In the flicker of lightning, their silhouettes merged, two figures shaped by trials that transcended mere political allegiances. For a moment, the entire planet felt at peace, as though the storms themselves recognized that Venterra and its queen had found something worth fighting for, someone who would stand not behind her, but at her side. And so, the prophecy whispered in 1,000 star systems found its answer. Every alien man in the galaxy had feared the formidable Storm Rider, the unstoppable queen of Venterra. But fear was not the only force in the universe. When a human named Marcus Hale arrived, without illusions of conquest or subservience, he brought with him the essence of understanding and compassion. It was enough to melt the edges of a thundercloud that had hovered over Althea's heart for years. Where once her storms had symbolized isolation, now they heralded protection and renewal. Where once her decisions were guided by the single principle of instilling fear, she began to embrace trust, forging alliances that would strengthen Venterra for generations. And where once no man dared remain in her presence, Marcus walked freely at her side, his stance reflecting respect and quiet loyalty rather than subjugation. Together, they wrote a new chapter for Venterra, one in which power and empathy coexisted, and where the storms raged not from solitude, but from a fierce resolve to preserve what they loved. The galaxy, vast and capricious, continued spinning its cosmic webs of conflict and discovery. But on Venterra, the storm's citadel stood proudly, no longer just a fortress of fear. In its corridors and halls, the shimmering arcs of lightning still flickered, but they illuminated a queen who had found her equilibrium. Those who visited spoke in hushed tones of how Althea's Storm Rider, once rumored to have no heart, now carried a radiant spark in her eyes whenever she looked at the Terran who stood beside her. Of course, not every neighbor welcomed Venterra's new stance. Some saw opportunities for exploitation, believing kindness to be a weakness. But each time they tested the planet's defenses, they discovered that compassion and vulnerability did not negate might. Indeed, they often enhanced it, forging an unbreakable bond between the queen, her people, and the man who had dared to treat her as neither goddess nor monster, but as an equal. On a peaceful afternoon, months after the battles that had ravaged the citadel, Althea and Marcus walked through the reconstructed courtyard. Crystal sculptures sparkled in the sunlight, testaments to Venterra's resilience. A group of children ran past, laughing, their bright eyes free of the shadow of intimidation that had once lingered over the populace. Althea slowed her pace, observing them with a thoughtful gaze. "They will grow up never knowing the old ways of absolute terror," she murmured. "Yet they'll still respect the storms and the responsibilities that come with wielding power." Marcus squeezed her hand gently. "They'll learn from you that true strength can be tempered by empathy," he said. "And maybe that's what will keep Venterra safe long after we're gone." She leaned against him, letting the warmth of his presence banish the last of her doubts. The storms overhead remained majestic, but their fury felt more measured, a silent guardian rather than a ravenous beast. In that equilibrium, Althea found the fulfillment she had long been denied, an affirmation that even the most fearsome forces of nature could evolve. Under the flickering glow of Venterra's twin moons, the couple paused for a moment at the highest spire of the citadel. The horizon stretched before them, an endless vista of glimmering dunes and dancing lightning. As if acknowledging their unity, the wind swirled around them gently, rustling Althea's cloak and carrying the faint scent of ozone. She turned to Marcus, her expression poised between quiet awe and a deeper longing. He brushed a stray lock of hair from her cheek. "I believe in you," he whispered, "and I believe in this world." She inhaled softly, electricity sparking at her fingertips like a gentle heartbeat. Every alien man was afraid, but you showed me there's another way. Thank you for seeing me beyond the storm." He stroked her cheek, a slow, comforting gesture. "You're not defined by fear anymore, and neither is Venterra." Their words faded into the hush of the night, as the clouds parted to reveal a sky strewn with stars, each one a distant possibility in the vast tapestry of the galaxy. In that moment, they stood as living proof that even in a realm dominated by unstoppable forces, compassion could foster a different kind of strength, one that endured, that transcended old prejudices and forged new legacies. For Althea, Storm Rider, and Marcus Hale, the journey had only just begun, but they faced it together, unwavering in their conviction that what bound them was more powerful than any tempest Venterra could conjure.